Welcome to the Sunday Superversive Livestream. I am not your host today. Today, I'm instead going to be working with Anthony and someone's very special to him. He's going to introduce to provide you the wonderful entertainment that you guys um, come to expect every week. And by that, I mean I am incredibly tired, and I'm probably going to take a micro nap while Anthony takes it away.
Yay! Welcome to the Sunday Superversive Livestream. I am Ben's co host, Anthony Marquetta, with special guest, my fiance, Katelynn Nye. Katelynn, how are you doing?
I'm not bad. Thanks for asking. How about yourself?
As Ben can tell you, on this show, I've never had a bad day in my life.
That's amazing to hear.
Right? Scientists should study this phenomenon.
Exactly.
Hold on, I'm trying to pull up the live chat to see if anybody will show up. Probably not, but you never know. Stranger things have happened.
That
All
is
right.
true.
Welcome. This is your first time as a guest on the stream. Since Ben is going to be micro napping, uh, we were going to discuss a little bit of everything, some of our mutual interests. We both like The Chosen. The new trailer came out. It'd be good to discuss that.
Yes.
And I was gonna give you a bit of an introduction to like the meaning of superversive and the history of the movement, crash course. What do you
Okay.
think?
That sounds like a plan. Let's get started.
Woohoo. Okay. First off, I mean, the answer is through me, but with a little bit more of an answer. How did you learn about like the superversive Like, what did you learn about it? I should say,
Uh,
since it's through me, that's how
yeah.
you learned about it. But
So, so far, things I've learned, it's all about like writing and using your creativity to write and explore different ideas and different topics. Like paranormal stuff, like with Pinkerton's ghost and stuff like that. So it's been fun learning, fun exploring, and I can't wait to learn more about it.
okay, I could see. So based on your interactions with it, I could see how that became the your impression of like what the superversive project kind of is. So this is we'll give you a little bit of a history lesson. There's a guy, the founder of the movement, in fact. His name is Tom Simon. Now, Tom Simon, I'll even link you the website. So
Okay.
since, check the Discord.
Okay.
Oh, hey, and Tom even wrote a new essay yesterday, so that's good to see. But anyway, so Tom Simon has like absolutely almost no audience, right? I say this factually. I don't say this insultingly. In fact, I mean it the opposite of insultingly because that's criminal. Because Tom Simon is a genius, right?
Yeah.
I own several of his books, but what he is particularly good at is writing essays, which is not something you normally think of when you go like, well, what do you like to read? I like to read essays, right? But you got to read Tom Simon's essays. Uh, well, one day in the year 2003, he wrote an essay called Superversive, and that started the superversive fiction movement. So let me find the essay for you. Yeah, way back in 2003. We're talking now. Wow, that's crazy. Over 20 years ago, uh, he wrote this essay. So that started the movement, such as it was, right?
Yeah.
Uh, And in the essay, Tom Simon makes a case. So, have you ever heard the term subversive before?
No, I have not.
All right. So, I I can sort of understand it because we're like everybody who's involved in this movement. We're all like semi-professional or professional writers, right? Like
Yeah.
you know David, who's going to be joining us later, hopefully.
Yes.
David is actually like, I'm not sure if you knew this, but he's actually a fairly successful author. Like
Oh, I
he
did
has
not know that.
yeah, he has a series out on Amazon that like actually sells pretty well. Now, even successful authors generally don't make a ton of money unless you're in the top like 0.1%. But he has like a fan base. You know, he is a professional writer. So that's like most of the people involved in the superversive fiction movement, right? We're all pretty experienced writers, so I can understand you not knowing all of the terminology, so I'll try and explain it. So, subversive fiction, right? It is fiction that tries to tear things down. You know, it's subversive. It tries to like break social norms and destroy the foundations of society because it thinks society's rotten and corrupt, right? Destroy morals and, you know, belief in God and all of that stuff. And it's generally, you know, very popular with critics. Critics love subversive fiction. Normally not as popular with the fans. Uh, Generally, the readers don't like it as much, but that nobody asks the readers. You take your medicine; it's what's good for you, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Subversive fiction, according to the critics, is good for you. Well, Tom Simon is one of us. He thinks like us, and you probably heard that, and you go, "That sounds terrible," right?
Yeah.
Right, right, and you would be correct. I should mention that subversive fiction isn't always bad because sometimes the things that need to be destroyed really are evil. But Tom Simon suggests a different idea. He says, how about instead of subversive fiction, we have superversive fiction? Superversive is the opposite of subversive, where subversive fiction tears down, superversive builds up. You know, subversive fiction is like anti God, anti society, anti human. Superversive is in favor of all of that. It's creating a vision of the world that people can rally around. And it tends
That's
to be
awesome.
very, what was that?
That's awesome. That you guys
Yeah, it's,
create something to rally together. That's awesome.
yeah, it's really interesting. Like, if you want to know, do you know the Lord of the Rings at all? I don't know how into
I
these sorts of pop
know.
culture things.
I know of one with uh Schmeagol. I think that's how you say it. With the ring. Oh, am I thinking of the Hobbit?
Yeah, well, he's actually in both, which is pretty funny. Uh, so yeah, Smeagol or Gollum. He's in both the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, but in the Hobbit he's known as only Gollum. In the Lord of the Rings, they call him Smeagol as well sometimes. Okay, so I'm gonna give you. Tom Simon uses the Lord of the Rings as his big example of what he imagines superversive fiction to me. So I don't know what you know. Like you don't know a lot about it, so I'm going to tell you. The Lord of the Rings, in my opinion, um, one of the greatest books ever written. Uh, you can make a very strong argument that's the greatest English book ever written in English. Uh, and I don't know if you know this, but the writer of the Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien, was a very staunch and very conservative Catholic. Uh, so the Lord of the Rings is a Catholic book. And I'm not
I
just saying that. Like, I'm not saying it's a Catholic book, like, oh, because he's Catholic, it's going to be Catholic. The author, Tolkien, has said that he consciously wrote the book with a Catholic philosophy. He said, this is a very intentionally Catholic book. It wasn't when I first wrote it, but when I revised it and when it was published, it was the Catholic themes were intentional. Sorry, I interrupted you. What were you going to say?
that's impressive. I didn't know JR was Catholic. That's awesome. I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
Yep. J.R.R. Tolkien was a Roman Catholic. Now, you know, this is like if you talk to people in our circles, right? The superversive fiction movement, we all know that, right? Oh, I just realized David might be going to the wrong link because we went to because we told him to use that link. So let me tell him, sorry, David, we're in the live stream. So hopefully he can join us soonish. All right. Anyway, so you who are not part of like this writing and fiction movement like we are, you might, it's not obvious to you. But to us, we're like, oh yeah. We are. Oh, David says things came up, so he might not be able to make it. That's okay. So, no problem. Make it when you can. Don't if you can't. Anyway, so you probably don't know any of this stuff, at least before I told you, right? But in our circles, this is very well known. J.R.R. Tolkien is a Catholic. The Lord of the Rings is a Catholic book with a Catholic philosophy. And according to Tom Simon, it is like the example of superversive fiction. It's what superversive fiction is supposed to be. Or like, do you know the Chronicles of Narnia?
Yes, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, where they have that Aslan, who's supposed to be Jesus, coming back right after he died, right?
Yes, exactly. So it's actually a 7-book series, right? And C.S. Lewis is straight up my favorite author. I love C.S. Lewis. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and the Chronicles of Narnia, that's superversive fiction, right? It's meant to build up. It's meant to show you, the good in society and the world and to give you kind of a path out of this mess. Like, in its strongest sense, it's superversive fiction. It's fiction that says something good about society that isn't about nothing. It's not nihilistic, which means like, it doesn't mean nothing. It's not depressing. It's not designed to make you sad. Now, we have Tom Simon. He wrote this essay on superversive, so hopefully you have an idea of what we mean when we say something is superversive. Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is a great example, right? It's the story of these 4 kids who go into a magical world, and then they learn that that a witch is controlling it and has made it always winter and never Christmas. And then over the course of the story, the king of Narnia, Aslan the lion, the great lion, returns and sacrifices his life in order to save the traitor Edmund. One of the 4 children has betrayed him to the White Witch. He sacrifices his life to save Edmund, but then he comes back to life and restores Narnia back to its former glory and makes the children the kings and queens of Narnia. Right? It's a Christian allegory.
Yeah.
Aslan is Jesus. He is he sacrifices his life to save to save a sinner, but then comes back and puts all to rights.
Yeah.
Brilliant book. Well, this essay and the superversive philosophy that's represented by Lewis and Tolkien, right? It resonated with a lot of people. And then fast forward, I want to say like a decade, maybe a little over that. A little over a decade later, and we have the superversive fiction movement. So, Jaji, Jaji Lamplighter, who is an excellent author of the Rachel Griffin series and the Prospero series, and many short stories. She also happens to be the wife of John C. Wright, who is a genius, also an excellent author of many different books. Well, she gets a group of people together, along with Jason Rennie, who was the editor of a small online magazine that is still running, though he's no longer the editor of it, called the Sci-Fi Journal, Science and Philosophy Journal. And she puts together a team of people. I was on that team initially, along with, I don't know if Ben was on it initially. I think he might have joined a little bit later. But David was definitely hanging around at the time. April, who you know about because I mentioned her to you, she was a part of this group, along with my friend Corey. A bunch of the people on the Superversive Discord, right, were a part of this original group, and she found it, and she started a website called superversivesf.com, meaning superversive sci-fi.
Yeah.
And we started putting up articles and things on superversive sci-fi. And Jason even started a small press where one of my books was published with it. This was like a little over a decade afterwards. So, Superversive, a small press, by the way, meaning a small publishing house. It's now defunct because it was just run by Jason and he didn't have the money to keep it going. But, the website, superversivesf.com, is still around. I'm no longer a writer for it, but I'll link it to you.
Okay.
I think it's still updating to my recollection, though I haven't taken a look at it. Now it's superversive.net. Yeah, it was last updated on March 2nd by Jason. So there you go. Jason is still around, still doing updates on superversive.net. And then a bunch of these writers signed on to the superversive fiction movement. And one of the big things that got our reach extended. So there's a publishing house, an independent publishing house, meaning that they're not like one of the big publishers that get published in stores. They're a smaller publishing house called Castalia House.
Yeah.
And they're run by an editor who uses the pen name Vox Day. His real name's Theodore Beale. His pen name is Vox Day. So Vox decided he wanted to expand the blog at Castalia House to get more writers on, and I was invited to contribute to the blog. And I, along with a friend of mine named Josh Young. Josh, you probably don't know because he doesn't regularly participate in the Discord, but he is a Facebook friend of mine. Anyway, so Josh Young and I had a column on the Castalia House website called called Superversive Tuesdays. Technically, I still can write for CastaliaHouse.com. Like, my privileges to write there have not been revoked. If I wanted to write an article for them, I am allowed to do it, and occasionally I do. But I haven't done a regular Tuesday article in a while. But yeah, we would publish reviews of things, and from a superversive perspective, we would publish articles about the superversive fiction movement. And this really got our reach out further because a lot more people, got involved in like debates and discussions about the superversive fiction movement. There was another movement going on called the Pulp Revolution that was about bringing back pulp fiction. Pulp fiction was the sort of like action adventure stuff that was popular in the 50s. And there were a bunch of people who were like really into bringing that back, and we had a lot of overlap with them. Like, a lot of people in the superversive movement and the pulp movement knew each other and were like talking with each other and writing posts and articles and things. So, this whole thing was like it grew our reach. Now, eventually, the superversive movement kind of fractured. There was some minor, not like super dramatic, but minor behind the scenes stuff, and people got busy and couldn't do things. So instead of being like one united movement like it used to be, where we all wrote for the same website, it sort of went in different ways. Well, you can fast forward to what I'm currently doing right now. I decided I wanted to uh, put together an online magazine. And my goal is, I know a bunch of people who started these sorts of things, but they're very difficult to keep going. So my goal was, I don't care how bare bones it needs to be. I don't care how cheap it needs to be. I want this website to still be running 10 years from now, right? I started it in
Yeah.
2024. I want it to be running in 2034, like still going with 2 short stories per month, superversive short stories. And that's when me and Ben and David and Ken Dickinson, who unfortunately had to drop out, but he did donate money and he was one of the early editors. We came together and we formed Hightower Magazine, where I am the editor in chief. And people sent us stories, and we published 2 short stories every month on the 14th and 28th of each month. So every 2 weeks, in other words, we publish a new short story. And this has been probably, I would suspect, the biggest project to have the Superversive label. The Superversive Livestream, which is what we're on right now, this was started. I want to say that Ben was one of the, or not Ben. I think Jason was one of the original hosts, and Ben was one of the hosts, but then Ben took it over. Ben did it on his own for a long time, and then Ben started Pinkerton's Ghosts. So You mentioned like, oh, you thought of it as like a movement where we do a bunch of stuff like Pinkerton's Ghosts.
Yeah.
So Pinkerton's Ghosts I would consider superversive, but not because it's like supernatural detectives. You don't need to be superversive and have a story about supernatural detectives. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We decided to make Pinkerton's Ghost superversive, right? Like, so we are superversive because we choose to be. Well, Ben invited me to be one of the writers for Pinkerton's Ghost, and then eventually we became friends over the course of doing this, and he invited me to be the co host of the Superversive Livestream, and that is how I got here. So that's the story of the superversive fiction movement. Today, there are a bunch of authors out there who like identify themselves as being superversive. John C. Wright is one of them. There is another author who you don't know, but who I know, named Nick Cole, who is definitely superversive. Of course, me and Ben. April is definitely a superversive author. David is definitely a superversive author. Pinkerton's Ghost is a superversive project. And now we have Hightower Magazine, that's an explicitly superversive magazine. So, we want to get this movement out there. We want to try and grow the brand, and it's going to be slow and it's not going to be immediate, but even every little bit helps. We want to try and help the publishing industry start publishing stories that really mean something. Yeah. Any questions
So far, no.
so far now?
Yeah.
What's your thought on the concept of superversive fiction?
It's definitely interesting. Definitely a lot of knowledge to take in. So,
I threw you a bunch of stuff really fast. I understand. This is like, but this is for the listeners too. If there's people who have just like, hopped onto the live stream and didn't know what we were talking about, now they know. This is why the superversive fiction movement exists and what it is, and we're really all just writers at heart in the end. All of the people on the Superversive live stream, right? We were all writers who heard about this idea and thought it was a really cool idea. Back in the early days, I wasn't so sure what I thought of the superversive fiction movement. It took me a while to get convinced. Uh, and then I changed my mind on it, or less changed my mind, more like I made up my mind about it, and now I'm one of the probably one of the leading figures of the movement just by default because we don't have a lot of like big figures in it. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So yeah, it's really just it's just a literary movement, but I think that what we do is important. I think it will mean something one day. Um and it means something to people now as well.
That it
So
does.
yeah, I I'm proud of what we've accomplished. I think that we've done good. I think we've done good work.
Yeah, you guys have done such an amazing job with the platform and everything. So,
We work hard. It would be nice. We're kind of hoping one day we want Pinkerton's Ghost to go viral, and we have. Trying to think of how to put it. We have put a lot of effort, is how I would put it, into
yeah.
the into Pinkerton's Ghosts, and unfortunately, we haven't really hit like we haven't gotten to the limit that we need, of like people finally coming in. I would like for us to hit like 1,000 subscribers and some regular commenters on the Pinkerton's Ghost Stories, but we're not quite there yet. However, we'll keep at it. Sometimes these things happen really fast. Maybe we'll go viral one day. You know.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, anything you want to add? Your thoughts on the movement before we go on to the Chosen, since that was our other topic of discussion.
Not that I can think of at this right at this very moment.
All right, then let's talk about The Chosen. So you wanted to talk about this, so you could lead
Yes.
this bit a little bit more since I just went on a whole thing with the Superversive movement. What did you think of the trailer? What are your thoughts on the season?
Season 5 is going to be, in my opinion, one of the most um, theatrical scenes, especially when they're doing the, Last Supper, it's. Then I can't wait to see how Dallas handles the betrayal of Jesus to Judas gives to Jesus. I can't wait to see how he does that. You know,
I
like
agree. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm more interested than what they're gonna do with the next season though, with like the crucifixion and everything else. So let's see how Dallas handles this scene. The trailer looked awesome. If you haven't seen it, go watch it so you know what we're talking about. But after this, don't click away, then watch the trailer. watch, continue watching this, and then go watch the trailer.
Yeah, we can't lose our one viewer. Oh no, we got
No,
two. We got two viewers. One of them might be me though, so it might actually be one viewer. But keep going.
but I can't wait to see how Dallas handles the betrayal scene with like Judas giving Jesus the money, giving, the priest, what's it called?
The
The,
30 pieces of silver.
yeah, I can't wait to see how they do that, how they do the Last Supper. I can't wait to see how they do just that whole aspect leading up to Good Friday. Because it's like they had teased it in the last season about leading up to Holy Week. So I'm excited to see what they do after this.
Yeah, I would agree with you. So, did you ever end up actually finishing season 4?
No, I never finished season 4, unfortunately. Don't come at me. I started college recently, so I'm still in my semester.
Oh yeah,
But
no. You're busy, I get you. Um I mean, yeah, I know. So, but I did end up I did watch season 4. I had mixed I liked season let me put this another way. I like season 4 a lot,
yeah,
but I had more problems with it than other seasons. I'll
yeah.
put it that way.
Especially with like how like that whole one death scene. I was like, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah,
Like
so
that
I think
was
we're gonna say we're gonna spoil it, right? So anybody who hasn't watched
spoiler
it, sorry.
alert.
Yeah, we are gonna spoil it because we have to discuss it.
Yeah.
So you've all been warned. But it's fine. It happens in the first episode. You'll figure it out soon enough of the season. Um. Anyway, yeah. So they kill off Thomas's love interest. So I have a theory I'm gonna throw at you. I was talking with Jaji about this, and we were discussing that we didn't really like it much. And I don't know if you, I think you might have been on the chat, but I don't know if you saw it because it was a while. It was a long while back, so you might have missed it. Uh, Jaji had an idea. She agreed. She didn't like it very much, but she said this. A lot of people forget this, but after the crucifixion, the in the temple, the graves of 500 righteous Israelites open up and they rise from the dead. Uh, She said, I wonder if one of the 500 raised from the dead is going to be Rama.
Mm, that's a workable theory, I think. Definitely workable. That's something that I won't be surprised if Dallas does, given how Dallas has been doing the seasons so far. So,
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. Uh, I think that solves some problems. So my biggest issue with the Rama thing is that it was kind of weird. I didn't know why they did it because people go because like okay, there's nothing in the Bible that says Thomas didn't have a wife, right? We know that apostles can have wives because
Yeah.
Peter has a mother-in-law, right? So, or I should say the 12, because an apostle and the 12 are two different things, but the 12 can have wives. Peter has a mother-in-law in the Bible. So they give Peter a wife in this, which makes perfect sense, right? Like he
Yeah.
should have a wife. Um, so I was like, it makes perfect sense that Thomas could get married. He absolutely can, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but what I was wondering about it was like, okay, why did you kill her off? Like, what's the point? He could get married. Is it to set up like the fact that he starts doubting or something like that?
Maybe.
I mean, it could be. Yeah.
And the fact that when he goes, sorry, it's not her time. You're like, come on, man. Like, why? Like,
I mean, that does make me think though, like it might make some sense if he's going it's not her time because she is going to come back
ow.
just later, right?
Yeah.
That could be what he meant. Which is really interesting if true, right? I would like it. For sure. I still am not totally sold on how they handled it though. What about you?
The way they handled it could have been a bit better. Like, I wasn't a big fan of like Jesus pulling the ultimate reverse card by telling them off for what they do and everything in the temple, and then that causes a big old riot. Personally, that could have been handled a bit better, in my opinion. But like, I'm still laughing about that scene though because it's like you don't expect him to say all of that to the Pharisees, and then he does, and then that causes a fight. And then Gaius, who knew he was going to be the centurion that goes to Jesus and begs him to heal his son. And I was like, that was a good pot on Dallas, kind of. But yeah, the way they handled that killing of Rama and John, like with John the Baptist.
Well, I'll tell you the other thing that was weird to me about the killing of Rama. Like, when somebody goes directly up to Jesus in the Gospels and begs him to heal someone, he always does it, right?
Yes.
Like, he never says, no, I'll do it later. He always helps people who ask
Yeah.
him. And then he even says this, right? Like he answers all prayers. He will help anyone who's asked.
Yeah.
Now we know, I get Dallas's point, right? Like we know that in the real world, we need to, things aren't going to be resolved the way we necessarily want them to. They might be resolved in the world to come or in a spiritual way, or we might need to be taught some sort of lesson or something we don't understand that we'll only understand later, right? That's the
Yeah.
problem with evil. So we're not always going to have all of our prayers answered. Uh, and somebody pointed out that, like, when you have the healing of the blind man, he's in Jerusalem, and they go, well, he heals him at some point, but he probably passed him every day, right? And he only heals him at a later point when he decides it's appropriate. So this isn't totally, like, out of left field for Dallas to do and for Jesus.
Yeah.
Uh, at the same time, yeah, I'm trying to think of how to put it. At the same time, something really sits wrong to me of Thomas like begging Rama to be healed and Jesus just going, no, it's not her time. And then
Yeah.
it's weird because it's like, okay, but I know the story of the Gospels. Like, there is
Exactly. Yeah.
zero reason that Rama can't be healed, right?
Yeah.
Like, you absolutely can heal her. You're just choosing not to.
Yeah.
And that's fine, I guess, but like, why? Why are you choosing not to? I don't understand.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. It's a very weird scene. It does make some sense though, and it sort of salvages it a bit if if Rama comes back later during the resurrection of the 500. But even then, I feel like it could have kind of been handled better. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. It could have been handled so much better than other than Thomas going to heal him. Jesus is like, nah, not me, not right now.
Yeah.
Like that could
It,
have been handled so much better.
it sits wrong.
Yeah, it does.
There's another scene too. I don't know if you saw this one because it was later in season 4. Did you ever watch the resurrection of Lazarus?
No.
Okay, so now in it, I found it to be a very weird scene because in the Bible, and the way that the church talks about it and portrays it, the resurrection of Lazarus is like a moment of triumph, like the last great moment of triumph before the crucifixion. Literally, it's like the intro to Passion Week, which is coming relatively
Yeah.
soon, in a few weeks. But it's like the last great moment of joy and triumph prior to the crucifixion. It's Jesus's greatest miracle. He not only heals a man from the dead, which, by the way, Jesus had done 2 times before. Um, he healed the little girl, Jairus's daughter, and
Yeah.
he also healed. People forget this because it's kind of blink and you'll miss it, and it's only in Luke's gospel. He healed the widow of Nain's son. Do you remember this story?
No, I don't.
So the widow of Nain, yeah, it's kind of wild that this one's so forgotten. I forgot about it until I looked it up specifically when I was looking up how many people did Jesus bring back from the dead, and the answer is actually 3. Jairus's daughter is very famous, and Lazarus is very famous,
Yeah.
but for some reason, the widow of Nain's son has kind of slipped under the radar. So it's in the Gospel of Luke. There's a widow from an area called Nain, right? And her son dies. Well, they're in the middle of the funeral and she's weeping and and crying because she has no one to take care of her now, so it's unclear what's even going to happen to her. She might need to become a beggar or something. And Jesus sees this going on and walks over to the funeral and puts his hand on the widow of Nain's son, and he sits up in the middle of the funeral. Right?
That's
It's a pretty,
impressive.
I
I did
mean, for
not know.
God. Yeah.
I didn't know that was even in the Bible.
Yeah, let me try and find the story actually. The widow of Nain's son. Raising of the son of the widow of Nain, Luke 7:11 through 17. There we go. Yeah, it's pretty short. So I'll read it. Jesus raises a widow's son. Luke 7:11 through 17. Soon afterward, Jesus went to a town called Nain, and his disciples and a large crowd went along with him. As he approached the town gate, a dead person was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. And a large crowd from the town was with her. When the Lord saw her, his heart went out to her, and he said, "Don't cry." Then he went up and touched the bier they were carrying him on, and the bearers stood still. He said, "Young man, I say to you, get up." The dead man sat up and began to talk, and Jesus gave him back to his mother. They were all filled with awe and praised God. "A great prophet has appeared among us," they said. "God has come to help his people." The news about Jesus spread throughout Judea and the surrounding country. So, yeah, kind of a forgotten miracle. So, generally, if you talk to biblical scholars about this, they say that the point of the three, that there are many points to the 3 stories, of course, but one of the points of the 3 stories is that they show Jesus's total mastery over death, right?
Yeah.
Um, like that with the Jairus's daughter, he heals her immediately after she dies. In fact, it is so quickly after she dies, he can convince people that she just fell asleep, right?
Yeah.
So but with the widow of Nain's son, it's longer. It's been at least a few hours because they are at his funeral. And with Lazarus, he specifically waits until 4 days have passed. So this is to prove that it does not matter how long you're dead, Jesus can still bring you back. Apparently there was a sort of folk belief. I've heard from Jimmy Aiken, so I haven't confirmed this, but it sounds plausible. There was a sort of folk belief that the spirit hung around for 3 days, which is why Jesus wanted to make sure he specifically waited 4 days before he brought Lazarus back. To show everyone that he can bring somebody back even if they've moved on to the afterlife, right?
Yeah.
So all of this is the setup, right? Like you have Lazarus, and it's this moment of incredible triumph, right? Everybody is mourning, everybody's weeping. You have the such a moving moment when I think it's I don't remember if it's Mary or Martha. I think it's Martha. When Martha says to Jesus, like, Lord, if you had been here, then our brother would not have died. Uh, and Jesus asks her, like, do you believe that your brother will rise? And she says, I do, Lord, in the resurrection on the last day. And then Jesus asks her, like, do you believe in me and who I am and that I have power over life and death or something like that? And she says, I do. And that's when Jesus weeps, which is, very famous moment, right? Jesus cries over the death of his
Yes.
friend, and then he raises Lazarus from the dead. And the way the scene's always portrayed in church and in passion plays and in the Bible itself, I would argue, is that it's a powerfully moving moment,
Yeah.
right? And
It
I
is.
find the scene very, very moving. What were you going to say?
I forget what I was going to say now, but that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, it's a very powerful and moving moment. I always really really loved his sister, the way that his sister spoke, because it felt very honest to me. Like they were, I don't know, it reads to me like they're broken up with grief, and they know that maybe they shouldn't be angry at God, and they're trying not to be, but they are a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Jesus asks them, like when the first thing they say to him is, if you were here, our brother wouldn't have died. And that's a sign of faith. Like we believe that if you were here, you could have prevented his death. But it's also like, I always read a little bit of anger, and maybe it's not intentional, you know, but like, why weren't you here? Right? Like they're accusing him almost. And then the next thing that they say too is like, do you believe he'll be raised up? And if imagine somebody saying that to you, you would probably answer the same way Martha did. Like, sure, in the second coming, yeah, everybody's going to be raised up. And Jesus is going, no, like, you don't understand. I'm going to do it right now. It's
Yeah.
very touching. The Chosen kind of doesn't play it that way. It's a little weird. Like, Jesus weeps, and it's kind of confusing as to why he's weeping. Um, because it's like he looks around at all of the people crying, and I guess that their grief moves him, but I
Yeah.
always took it as he was moved at, the death of his friend. So let's do the same thing. Let's look up the raising of Lazarus. We'll make today a Bible study, right? The raising
Right.
of Lazarus. Uh, and this is John 11, 1 through 44. Okay. We're not going to read the whole thing. I just want part of it. John 11, 1 through 44. All right, cool. So this is the ESV translation. I don't care about that. I just want the same thing. I just want a translation that gives me the basics, and this works. So this is Jesus weeps. So verse 28. When she said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying in private, the teacher is here and is calling for you. And when she heard it, she rose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary rise quickly and go out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Now when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, Where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. So the Jews said, See how he loved him. But some of them said, Couldn't he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying? Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Jesus said, Take away the stone. Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he has been dead for 4 days. Jesus said to her, Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me. When he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen strips, and his face wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." Okay, so it's just a note, like, he does say it after, people, I'm trying to find the moment again where he goes, do. Yeah, he sees everybody weeping, and he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And after they say, "Lord, come and see," Jesus weeps. But the reaction of the people is, "See how he loved him." So it's clear, like, the grief is at the death of Lazarus, right? Like, he's
Yeah.
crying because of Lazarus. Lazarus was his friend, and I don't know. I feel like the Chosen didn't quite capture that exactly. But the other thing that was weird about it was that after Lazarus came back to life, the apostles' reaction is kind of like alarm. Like, the way that I would describe it is everybody gets together and huddles up and is like, "Well, we're all kind of screwed now, right?" You know, Thomas is upset because he's like, "Why did you bring Lazarus back and not Rama?" Which, great question, Tom.
Yeah.
Uh, that's actually a really good question. Why did he not bring Rama back?
Yeah.
But whatever. Anyway, Lazarus comes back. It's kind of odd, like, because the instead of this being like this moment of joy and triumph, the apostles are like kind of terrified. They're like, "What are they going to do to Jesus?" Now they're going to do. It's like, I don't think that was the vibe of the resurrection of Lazarus. Lazarus. I think everybody was overjoyed, right?
Yeah.
Like, everybody was happy about it. Uh, Especially because you get to they have a scene later, and this is a good scene in The Chosen. I actually really like it, where like all of the Romans are together eating dinner, along with Joanna, who is, remember, on one of the Romans who's on their side. You know,
Yeah.
she was like a disciple of John the Baptist. Uh, and she is in the Bible, by the way. She's like one of the women, which is like a group of women that follow Jesus. Uh, So Joanne, and they're all talking about Lazarus, and they said, "We heard that like he supposedly brought this guy back from the dead," and they're discussing whether or not they should just go and kill him. And they're like kind of agreeing, like, maybe we should just go and kill Lazarus. And someone goes, "Wait a minute, why?" He goes, "If you kill Lazarus, why wouldn't the miracle worker just raise him from the dead again? It seems more logical that you would have to kill Jesus." And they all look at her, and then they go, "Huh." They're like, "That's a good thought." And they just kind of go back to their dinner.
Yeah.
So that was a cool scene, but like, I don't know, I just didn't really like the vibe of the resurrection of Lazarus. What do you think?
Um. Yeah. Based on what you tell me, Dallas could have done better with it. Like, he had so much stuff he could have done and didn't do with it, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. Like, I would agree. Trying to think of how to put it. I would say that it should have been more joyous.
Yeah.
But, that's yeah, that is what it wasn't like bad. It was well done, but I was looking for more of a sense of joy in that scene specifically. I don't know, something for Jesus's greatest miracle. And that's always how it's portrayed by the church, right? Like, the raising of Lazarus was the greatest of all of Jesus's miracles. I
Yeah.
was expecting more. Uh, but overall, it was a good season, I would say. Now, here's something else I want to talk about. Now that the Protestants are gone, they're not here. Uh, and By the way, I know you work tomorrow and you like to get to bed earlier, so we'll go till 8:30. How does that
Okay.
sound?
That
Ben,
sounds
if you're
perfect.
Ben, if you're listening, It's 8:30. Uh, and I know I said the Protestants aren't here, but Ben, in theory, is listening. So, okay, what do you think about them not including John 6?
That was a act of odd. That was like, in my opinion, a slap in the face. Clearly it's mentioned in the Bible, John 6, about the bread of life. Unless if they're gonna do that for the Chosen season 5, if they do that,
That doesn't make sense though, because we're past that point, right? We're
that's
at the
true.
Last Supper.
Yeah,
I don't
to
know
be
when they would do
fair,
it.
Alice missed that opportunity big time. You know?
Yeah, it's really interesting because you remember the big Eucharistic Congress that they held, right?
Yeah, in Indianapolis this last year. Yep.
Well, Jonathan Rumi attended it, and Jonathan Rumi, who plays Jesus, by the way, for people who don't know, Jonathan Rumi is a Catholic. Uh, and Jonathan Rumi attended this Eucharistic Congress. And Jonathan Rumi, there's a video of it. You should watch it. 'Cause it's really powerful, actually. It's very moving because he does it in like the accent he uses for Jesus. He does a reading of John 6. And it's a very, very powerful reading. And he says something very curious. He says, like, I finally get the opportunity to say this. Thank you for giving me the opportunity I didn't get. So
Wow,
clearly,
Alice.
yeah,
What'd you do, man?
clearly he did not agree with Dallas's decision not to include this scene.
Clearly, he did not agree with that.
Especially the weirdest part was that they have Peter say, "Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life." Like they have Peter say that. But they don't but here's the thing, like a lot of people don't even remember this. I'm not sure even if you did until I just said it now, but Peter says this after the bread of life discourse.
Yeah, he does say that after, because many people turn away, and Jesus is like, "Are you gonna go with them?" And Peter's like,
Yep.
"Where are we gonna go?" You know?
Like instead they move that line to a different thing. Like they're about to go basically into Jerusalem for Holy Week. And he says like, "Are you going to stay with me?" And that's when Peter says, "To whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life." And I was like, that's not when Peter said that.
Now he said that after the bread of life discourse.
And it makes you wonder, why did Dallas not include the bread of life discourse, but include that line? Changing the context
Yep.
of the line a lot. Like the original context is that the reason he's saying that is no matter what Jesus says, he trusts him implicitly as God, right? You know, as having the words of eternal life. But now it turns into, you know, I'm going to follow you into this dangerous situation or something, right? It's very strange. It's not bad, but necessarily, or like it's not badly written. It makes sense. But I didn't really like that change. And it makes you wonder, like Jonathan Rumi was on an Frad's show. And they asked him about doing the Last Supper scene, and Jonathan was like, "Oh, it was like the most moving day of filming I've ever had." He goes, "I don't even think about doing the crucifixion,
Yeah.
right?" Like he goes, "That's going to be like next level." He goes, "But," and Matt asked him, "Does it make any difference that you believe in the real presence when you say, this is my body?" And he says, "Of course it makes a difference." He's like, "How can it not make a difference?"
Yeah.
He's like, "When I say it, I mean it, right? Like this is
Yeah.
my body and this is my blood, right? Uh Blood of the new and eternal covenant that will be shed for you and for many for the
Hmm.
forgiveness of sins. Do this in memory of me," which is of course the words that are said at every mass. Uh right? So I'm really looking forward to Jonathan doing the scene because Jonathan's saying that like when he does it, he's trying to get across that it really is his blood and really is
Yeah.
his body, right?
I
So
can't wait to see how they handle that part in this season. And then, because we all know next season is going to be the big Good Friday crucifixion, if Dallas teams up with Mel Gibson, that would be fantastic for it. Because Mel Gibson did the Passion of Christ. The one that was done in like Aramaic, I think it was.
Yes, so you've seen The Passion of Christ, right? Do you
Yes.
watch it every year?
Good Friday, yeah.
Um, yeah, I watched The Passion of the Christ for the first time last year. I found it incredibly moving.
Oh yeah.
Uh, like I was really really moved by The Passion of the Christ. Come to think of it, we should probably watch it together. But uh,
Not until
on the other
marriage.
hand, what was that?
Ben's telling us to knock it off.
Yeah.
No passion, no passion of the Christ watching until marriage or until with the door open.
Um, yeah, right. Yeah, because it's such a great date night movie. That's a movie you're gonna make out during when the Passion of the
Exactly.
Christ. Uh,
Showing all the crazy scenes with the whipping and the
right. What a
yeah.
romantic film.
I know, right? Right?
I mean, I guess that there's a sense that it is a romantic film since it's the greatest love story ever told, but you know what
Maybe.
I mean. But you
Maybe.
know what I mean. Uh,
Yeah, I do.
Now I am curious how The Chosen is going to do, especially since it's been covered before, and in my opinion, quite masterfully in The
Yeah.
Passion of the Christ. It's a really, really moving movie. Uh, and The Chosen, though, I mean, I'm a fan. Like we've said, I'm a fan of The Chosen. I don't think it's perfect. Neither do you. You've said some nitpicks that you have with it,
Yeah.
but overall, it's very good. One thing I will mention, and we'll say this will be the last thing before we leave we say goodbye for the night. Uh, One thing that I will mention is I think the biggest achievement of season 4 was Judas. I thought they did a tremendous job with Judas because it's so easy to go like one of two ways with Judas. You either make him like a mustache twirling villain, somebody who's just
Yeah.
evil for evil's sake, or you make him too sympathetic, like that he didn't
Season
really do
3
anything wrong.
When Dallas introduced Judas at season 3, at the end of season 3, he was such a likable guy too, and you're like, come on, man, like why'd you do this?
Yeah, I really appreciated it though because like
Yeah.
it's like a Scylla and Carabotus. This is, you know, Greek mythology reference, right? In between like a rock and a hard place, On one hand, you don't want to make him like mustache twirlingly evil, but on the other hand, you don't want to make him like, oh, Judas did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Judas definitely did something wrong. Like he's very clear that Judas is making the wrong decisions, but you totally understand it, right? Like, I know exactly why Judas is making the decisions he does. You can even imagine yourself making those decisions in his place. At the same time, it doesn't excuse them. He's still the bad guy, right? Like,
Yeah.
he's still doing, or even he's still doing a horrible thing. He's still about to betray Jesus. It's not good, but you get it, right? Like, you totally understand it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that I think was really, really an achievement of season 4 of The Chosen.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to season 5 and how they handle Jesus' betrayal. I'm sure it's going to be suitably tragic. They showed a scene where Jesus says, "I'll pray for you," and that got a bunch of Calvinists up in arms because they're like, "No, Jesus can't pray for him if he's going to betray him." And it's
Yeah.
like, yes, he can. There's a whole bunch of things. For one thing, all he said was, "I'm going to pray for you." He didn't say, "I promise that you won't betray me." He doesn't say what the prayer is going to be for. It could have been a prayer like the one he prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he said, "Take this cup away from me, but not my will, but yours be done." Right? It
Yeah.
could have been the same thing. Hey, like, if you can, spare Judas from this trial, but if you can't, not my will, but yours be done. It could have been something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, any number. It could have been any number of things. It doesn't mean like, oh, well, I guess Jesus' prayer failed. That's nonsense. Anything you want to say before you go? Because I know that you gotta get to sleep since you wake up early in the morning.
Um, Thank you, Ben, for letting me co-host this evening. It was a lot of fun. Thank you, Ben. And that's it, I guess.
Yay! I had fun. This was kind of a last second thing, so it's as far as it could have gone so much worse. And there you go. That's my review of the evening. Yeah, 6 of 10 could have been worse.
Mhm.
Anything you want to say, Ben?
Uh, not really. Don't.
Ben's too tired.
I So there's a band, and they annoy the heck out of me because they have the most elaborate setup for the bar I work at, and I can't leave and finish my chores for the night until they're done. And the band doesn't really help out. They'll take their like guitars and stuff, but they just hired two guys and they take their sweet time. And it's like it took them like 2 hours to break down the stage. It was
Ooh.
unacceptable, and I had already been working 15 hours, give or take, almost
Oof.
15. So yeah, I'm just down and out. And I got a very long day tomorrow. Do pray for my father. Those who hear it, he's getting some minor surgery on his eye, and then it's St. Patty's Day at the bar. So it's one of those
Good luck,
things.
boy.
Ben.
I don't have
Good
it.
luck,
I
Ben.
don't have it in the tank. Thank you. Have a good day,
God
everybody.
bless.
You know, we'll I'll try to have something more interesting. And I guess Anthony and I do have to cross a bridge very soon, namely the Eucharist stream.
Oh boy. Yeah, we did kind of poke the bull in this episode. I can't really be too mad.
Yep, yep. I've got some guests I'm talking to. I've got some stuff I'm doing. But for now, I will have to leave you, my dear listeners. Uh, Katelyn's very wonderful, wonderful person. Anthony is also a wonderful, wonderful person. They're very beautiful together.
Aw.
Thank
In
you,
a sort of
Ben.
spiritual way, not necessarily on the eyes, but definitely in a spiritual way. They're wonderful together.
Oh my goodness.
Have a good night.